Hello and welcome. I am Matt Rotty, and this is the Greater Prescott podcast, where we talk about, you guessed it, all things Greater Prescott. Today is a very special episode. Sitting across from me is my lovely wife, Emily Rotty. Emily, thank you for finally coming on the podcast.
Of course.
How many months ago did I tell you I wanted you on the podcast?
4 or 5, probably. Something
Yeah,
like
it was
that.
a couple months ago though that we were like, okay, we're gonna do this, and then it's the beginning of December. So, thank you for having the courage to come onto the podcast.
Sure.
Emily, actually just tell the name of your studio right now.
Rotty Violin and Piano Studio.
Rotty Violin and Piano Studio. So we are gonna get into a lot of things. Extra deep because we're married, and then we're going to talk about the whole music stuff because I know there's a lot of stuff that you have a lot of parents asking you and just stuff, a lot of information that you have that will be very helpful. So I'm excited. Try to get comfortable, get settled in, and we'll talk. All right, to kick things off, where were you born and raised? What did you do when you were a kid? And let's get this party started.
Okay. I am from Chandler, Arizona. I lived there my whole life until college. I went to college in San Diego. So up until that point, I was in Phoenix. Most of my family lived in Chandler also. And so I grew up with lots of aunts and uncles and cousins all around. I am from a very musical family. My mom was a music major in college.
Really? I don't think I remember that.
Don't tell her that.
She's going to listen to this. Sorry, Rhonda.
She was a music education major.
Remember,
initially.
your whole family's going to listen to this.
Okay.
All right.
And so she's a pianist.
Okay.
And she sings. And my dad also sings and can play guitar and can kind of fiddle on the piano just a little bit.
When was the last time Paul got the guitar out? I don't think I knew that either, Paul.
It's been a while. So I grew up with kind of just music in my life. My mom taught me piano when I was really little.
I should have done this before we got married so that I could have gone back and listened to everything so that I remember everything.
Wow.
10 years in. Better late than never.
Now you know.
Yep.
So my mom, like I said, started me on piano when I was little. And actually, even before that, I was 3 years old when I started playing violin for the first time. My first violin was about this big. And actually, my mom kept it, so I still have it. But she was a music major, like I said.
Okay.
And she believed in a certain philosophy of teaching music that started children very young, and I learned by ear as a little kid, and it wasn't until I was a little bit older that I started reading music. But I think she would tell you if you asked her that she wished she would have waited a couple more years to start me.
Okay.
I was probably pretty slow to start.
A little young.
But as pretty much as far as I can remember, I've always loved piano and violin. I've never resented it. I've never not wanted to play. It's always been something I've loved to do.
It's interesting you say you never resented it because I grew up doing soccer and swimming at a high level, and I got to age 13 and I resented it. I don't know how many kids experience something like that. And it's not like my parents were pushing me. I just was pretty driven at the time, but I just got burned out. And so it's interesting that you didn't go through such a cycle maybe as deep or as long or something. And obviously you never quit.
Right. My mom so I have 2 younger brothers, and she gave each of us the option that when we got to 7th grade, we could choose if we wanted to continue playing piano and violin.
Interesting.
So I decided to keep doing it, and both my brothers continued in music, but not piano or violin. They chose different instruments.
Oh, okay.
So both my brothers are musical. We all sing, and so we've done handful of times we've done some things as a whole family.
All right.
So
Okay.
Yeah.
I also forgot to introduce you're going to play 2 songs, part of this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So let's do that. Let's do one of them right now.
Okay.
So we'll just tell everyone what you're going to play.
Mm-hmm.
Tell them both instruments and what
Okay.
pieces, and then we'll cut for that first piece. And then at the end, we'll do the second piece.
So first I'm going to play violin, and since it's December, Christmas time, I'm going to do a Christmas piece. I'm doing O Holy Night, which is probably one of my favorite Christmas pieces. And then piano.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
then at the end I'll do piano.
Okay.
It's just a Christmas medley, handful of few different Christmas carols.
Right. So you're going to get all your Christmas
I am
out.
I'm in the season.
All right. Well, then let's cut here. We'll look at the camera for a nice, easy cut point, and then you can play your violin piece. All right?
Sounds good.
Let's do it. All right. That was the violin piece. Fun how we can do that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So before you played the violin piece, you were talking about you just grew up just musical.
Mm-hmm.
Share a little bit about being, because at some point you were also homeschooled.
Mm-hmm.
Run us through when you went to school, public school, then was homeschooled. Go through that.
Yeah, when I was in 6th grade, my dad was currently teaching junior high history, and both my parents decided that they just wanted, well, there were a couple of reasons. They wanted to be able to teach me what they wanted to teach me, and also our family was going in a bunch of different directions, and we just weren't seeing each other much, so they decided that we wanted to spend more time together as a family, and so homeschooling felt like a good option, and we had a really good community of homeschoolers at our church at the time, and they're still, all those people in the group are some of my best friends.
Yep.
It was a really special group.
Okay.
So from 7th through 10th grade, I was homeschooled, and at that time, it was really cool because I was able to, and I had a lot more time on my hands. So yes, I was doing school for a large portion of the day, but part of my school day was also practice piano for an hour, practice violin for an hour. When I was a sophomore, I was a part of a local a public school symphony orchestra. And so they allowed me, even though I was homeschooled, they allowed me to play in the orchestra. And it was probably one of the better ones in the district. And so it was a really good opportunity to get to do that I probably wouldn't have had if I would have just been in the schools in my or near my house, or if I would have. Later on, I went to private school. It was a great school, but the orchestra was a little teeny tiny one, so it wasn't.
Makes sense.
It was a really good opportunity as a sophomore to get to do that.
Yeah.
And also, I think that same year, sophomore or junior year, I joined the Chandler Symphony Orchestra, which I think at the time was called Southwest Symphony.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure they've changed their name. I haven't followed them or kept up with them, but Chandler Symphony basically is just a community orchestra. So I was able
all
to...
ages?
There were a few high schoolers, and it was mostly college students and professional musicians.
Okay, I guess that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Obviously not, 10-year-olds, but so yeah, you were
mostly
one of the youngest.
Right.
Okay. What was that experience like?
It was really great. I think it was good for me, especially the high school I went to. I didn't really get to play much, music of a lot of substance.
Yeah, especially at your level at
right.
that point.
And so it was really fun to get to play with professionals and learn from. It was probably my first time to be under like a professional conductor. So that was really cool. And we did a performance every month. And so we just went through a lot of music. And so I got the experience of getting to play a lot of stuff. So when I went to college, I was a music major in college, and I had already played a lot of the songs that we got to do in college. And so
you already had a lot of experience, if you will, at that point. I want to go back. So you said you didn't resent playing violin, piano, and probably opposite of that, you actually enjoyed it. What was it? Do you remember? I'm trying to think back when I was playing soccer at a pretty high level for my age at the time. I'm trying to think of what drove me, and it's kind of, I would say it's eluding me. I'm not really sure what it was.
I don't know if it was because I was...
Just keep talking. I'm going to hit that light.
I felt that I was good at it, and I think that just the more I practiced and the more lessons I went to, the better I got, and I was able to do more and more with it. I was able to play in more orchestras, and I played in my church all the time. I ended up, I think my sophomore year was my first year to audition for the Arizona All-State Orchestra. And so I did All-State Orchestra a couple years, and then All-State Choir 1 year too.
That was high school?
That was in high school. Okay. So I just, maybe just the opportunities I was able to have because, the more I persevered and the more I learned, the more fun it got.
Totally.
So.
How much were you practicing a day?
By the time I got to high school, it was probably 45 minutes to an hour a day.
Okay.
So
Which
I don't know. You'll have to ask my mom.
both instruments? Just one?
An hour on each.
Okay.
Yeah.
Man, you were all in.
That's why being homeschooled was great because I had the time to.
Yeah, you did have the time to.
So.
Yeah. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And your brothers, you said they were musical.
Mm-hmm.
They were very athletic.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to share how unathletic you were because that's just fun.
So my dad is very athletic.
Mm-hmm.
He can play, I think, just about any sport he ever tries.
Yeah.
And
still, to this day,
still,
he can.
Yep, he can. And so they tried to, most of my dad tried to get me to play, I think softball was my first sport in second grade. I stunk. It was so bad. And, we had a basketball hoop in our front yard, and he tried to teach me how to shoot baskets. And pretty much every sport he tried to teach me, I wasn't good at it. I'm not that competitive. And so that's part of the reason, like, if I miss the shoot, then
you just said miss the shoot.
Miss the shoot. The shot.
There we go. That's how you guys know. I didn't try to trap you either. It's admittedly
it's
just
not my thing.
It was never your strength, which is fine.
But I was consumed by music lessons and performances.
Totally.
So that was
how you say you weren't very competitive, and part of that may have been why athletics didn't suit you. You're not the most athletic person, just your build, that's not how God made you.
Right.
I imagine you were competitive doing music, and I don't know if that's the right word to use.
Yeah.
What is a word that you might use to describe tenacity comes to mind or
yeah, I definitely
because you had something, right?
Yeah,
that I mean, all athletes have
sure
this inner drive, and I believe you had something very similar.
Yeah, I think I strove to do really well. It was fun to beat other people at things like an all-state competition.
Totally.
It was fun to get one of the higher chairs.
Absolutely.
I also wasn't devastated that I didn't get first chair, whatever. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you ever have a point when you felt like your parents were pushing you too much, or I feel like something like that, do you remember it being more of an internal thing, just this drive that you yourself had versus this weight that your folks were putting on you because you'd clearly been putting in a lot of time and things like that?
I don't remember it, especially as I was older.
Yeah.
Maybe as a kid, I just don't remember. I'm sure there were days where my mom told me to go practice and I didn't want to, but it was just what we did.
Yeah.
And I'd been doing it since I was 3, so it was just kind of part of life.
Yeah.
And so no, I don't have any memories of feeling like my parents were pushing me.
That's great.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I bring that up as as we raise our kids, thinking about how do you go about this thing that they're maybe really good at that you as a parent want them to continue, or frankly just to do for the first time because you want them to experience it.
Yeah.
So it sounds like your parents did a great job.
Yeah, I think so.
I don't know the word, but yeah, going about it in a healthy way so that you didn't feel pressured, and at the same time they gave you opportunity.
Yeah, I think so.
That's hard. I think that's hard to do. I don't feel like my parents pushed me to do soccer. That I just got burned out.
Yeah. Or maybe if they did push me, they did it in a way that it doesn't stick in my memory.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a negative experience.
Which is good.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay. So you start music when you're 3 years old, which you're going to get into more in the podcast. That's, I don't think, what you recommend in general when parents, because the most often asked question by parents to you about music is, how young can I start my kids?
They're anxious to start.
And so we'll get more into that, but I think the answer is generally not that old.
Not usually.
So you've been playing music for years and years and years, and then it was
Mm-hmm.
time for college, or it
Mm-hmm.
was time to be done with high school. How'd you go about
Mm-hmm.
where you went to college? Talk about all that.
Okay. So, a couple things. I was raised in a Nazarene church, and there was a handful of Nazarene colleges in the U.S., and there was one in San Diego on the beach, or basically on the cliffs.
On the
And
cliffs.
um, I grew up going there every May. They would do a competition for high schoolers,
Okay.
and I won every year for
Yeah.
the music category. So I had already got a handful of scholarships,
Okay.
and I had met a handful of the professors. And I think my junior or senior year of high school, I had been talking to one of the music teachers, and he told me they were getting, because it's a small-ish college, and so they had told me that they were hiring a new strings professor,
Okay.
as they hadn't had one before that.
Mm.
And so I think my freshman year was maybe his second or third year at Point Loma.
Wow.
So,
And who was
and he
that?
was very highly recommended, and I was excited to have a good strings teacher. Dr. Phil, oh my gosh, Dr. Phil Tyler.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking it was Dr. Tyler.
Blanked mine right there.
Yeah.
So Dr. Tyler was my strings professor.
So you made the decision to go to Point Loma, other
Yeah.
than San Diego, which is the greatest weather just about on the planet.
Yeah, so they had I liked their music program. I mean,
Mhm.
it was obviously a beautiful place.
Yeah.
I knew a couple people going there.
Okay.
It wasn't that far away from home.
Yeah.
But I knew I didn't want to go in state. I wanted to go out of state.
And did you know what you wanted to go to college for?
Oh, yeah. So that was the other part of it. So I started teaching private lessons as a high schooler, as a sophomore in high school. And I really liked it. I taught both piano and violin.
Okay.
And so I decided to be a music education major. And the more I got into it, the more I loved it. And I never had any doubts of, should I do this or not?
Yeah.
And then as a student teacher, I really liked it.
Okay.
Yeah, student teaching was hard, but
Yeah.
it was a good learning experience.
It's not meant to be easy, I'd
right.
imagine.
And I really liked being in the classroom. I really liked the performances I got to do with the choirs and orchestras that I taught. So,
Okay.
Point Loma at the time, that was the college I went to. I don't know if I said that. Point Loma Nazarene University had strings, what did they call it? String Project, which was a program for music education teachers who specifically wanted to teach strings classes. And
Okay.
they started it my junior year. And so basically it was kind of a cool partnership with the community. They had any children in the community who wanted to take strings classes could come to the college. And so it was Dr. Tyler and then another, they called the master teachers. And then I think we probably had 6 college students, strings majors, who were kind of the student teachers.
Yep.
And so basically we taught all the classes, and then our master teachers observed us and then gave us pointers and tips for how to do it better.
Okay.
So not only were these kids getting a very affordable orchestra experience, but also we as student teachers, before we were even student teaching, got the experience of teaching a group of strings players. So it was a really valuable program that I got to be a part of.
As I share on many of my podcasts, it's so much fun to connect the dots. And the first dot was when you were 3 years old and your mom gets you playing. And then, your entire, your trajectory is pretty linear.
Yeah.
Like you played music.
Yeah.
Mine, not so much. And yet I sit here doing a podcast for the dots that also got connected for me. So it's interesting and so much fun to just hear all these things and to see how people's experiences make them into the person that they are today. So that's really neat experience that you had in college amongst teaching private, lessons when you were only in high school, and just the experiences in the different orchestras and symphonies and man.
it's a big part of my life.
That is a big part of your life.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Keep running us through the college. If there was anything else.
So I was a music education major versus performance. I like performing, but I didn't see that as a career.
Okay. How come?
The lifestyle
Mm-hmm.
wasn't my first choice, and
Yeah.
I loved teaching, and I still do, and that's just kind of where I felt
Perfect.
how God made me.
Do you think you could have gone the performance route and been quote successful, or done what
Maybe
is required of someone in that position?
I don't think so, because
Okay.
I don't think I had the drive.
Yeah.
It takes a lot to
A
do
lot.
that.
I was gonna say, because growing up playing a couple hours a day, that's a lot.
Yeah,
But when that's your life, and
right,
like you eat
right.
and pay the bills because you play music,
Sure.
turns totally different,
Mm-hmm.
which is it's an interesting thing.
Like now, I love doing gigs. I do play professionally.
Mm-hmm.
Since having kids, I haven't played in a
Yeah, it's been
symphony.
fewer.
But
Yeah.
I used to, down in Phoenix, I used to be a part of a string quartet, and so we played mostly for weddings, and that's mostly what I do is I play for weddings or family events or
Special
things like
events.
that.
Mm-hmm.
But
Okay.
that's about the extent of my
Yeah. You
professional
don't strike
playing.
me as someone who would have enjoyed the performance aspect
Right.
of it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. It's not just doesn't seem to fit your personality as well as what the teacher component is.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad that you were.
Glad I figured that out.
Yeah, totally,
Yeah.
totally. Mm-hmm.
So going back to college, a lot of the performance majors had to do a couple different recitals. I only had to do one as a music education major.
That's why you did it.
That's it. But I actually ended up doing a second one anyways. So
She is an overachiever, guys.
So I did my junior recital on violin, and then I decided to do basically the definition of a junior recital for voice my senior year.
Oh, okay.
So I did it with a friend, and it was really fun.
You haven't mentioned anything about voice. Where did that come from?
Yeah, I started singing. Well,
I guess
basically
you
sung
did
my whole
mention
life,
it
but
because you mentioned choir.
right.
I forgot about that.
So so in high school, that's when it mostly started. I joined choir when I went to high school, my junior year, and then I was in a couple different choirs in college. Took voice lessons. I helped direct one of the choirs my senior year.
Okay.
And then when I was student teaching, I did part choir and part orchestra.
Okay.
So I love singing also.
Yeah. How much time, I think, not that that's new to me, but I don't think I realized you may have done as much voice as you did. In terms of percentage, what percentage did you do of violin in college versus voice?
It was pretty equal.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think I realized that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was in one orchestra and a quartet, and I took private lessons. So I had all those things I had to practice for. And then I did one full choir, one kind of like a smaller choir group, and then voice lessons. So
okay.
It was I was in the practice rooms of music building.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit.
Most of the day. My roommate called it what did she call it? The vortex or something? Because he said it would swallow me up for the day. But yeah, I spent hours practicing. It was a big part of my college time.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
But it was worth it.
Cool. When did you graduate, and then what did you do after you graduated?
I graduated in 2006, and then the way the program worked, I did a 5th year for my teaching certificate, and so the 5th year is when I did all my classes and all my student teaching for that part of it. And then, so that was 2007, I finished. And there weren't very many music teacher positions available in San Diego.
All right.
and I had no money, and so I couldn't afford to live in San Diego. So I interviewed I had a friend that taught in Mesa Public Schools.
Mm-hmm.
And
who was that?
A girl I went to high school with, Crystal Blakely at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And she told me about the district and how much she loved it. And so I interviewed there and got a job right out of college that summer.
Mm-hmm.
And it was teaching junior high orchestra. I'm trying to remember if the first year was full-time orchestra. Oh, yeah, it was. It was part-time at the junior high and part-time at an elementary school.
Okay.
Because it's hard to get a strings teacher job full-time at one
school. Absolutely.
So, but it was definitely a fun year. It was a huge learning curve.
Yeah, what do you remember from that?
There's just, there's only so much that college and student teaching can prepare you for. When you're in charge of your own classroom. It's so different. But I would say my biggest problems were just dealing with behavior issues.
Okay.
And I got better at that as
Mm-hmm.
I got more experienced.
Yeah.
But I had a lot of fun. I had some really fun students that made it a good first year. Had amazing coworkers.
Yeah. Give them a shout out. Who were they?
Dana Dix was the band teacher, and Ted Gibson was the choir teacher. Yeah. And we had so much fun together, and they were so supportive and helpful. And I'm so glad that that's how my teaching career got started.
No kidding. I don't
know how I would have made it without them.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, it was a fun team to be a part of. But I think, it was the second year that I was teaching, same school. We took all of our kids, all the choir, all the band, all the orchestra to Disneyland. And so not only did I plan all the logistics for that, but I prepared my students to perform at Disneyland. So it was so fun. We got to play on one of the bandstand areas, and we also did a competition in Anaheim, and
totally.
So it was really fun.
We did
it 2 years.
What a great opportunity for the students. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was really great.
Yeah.
It was a lot of work.
Oh, tons of work.
Really fun.
I imagine they will remember it
Mm-hmm.
forever.
Probably.
I mean, those are like
I don't think
seminal
I'll ever forget it.
moments in kids' lives like that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then we got to play at Disneyland. So it was fun.
Yeah.
So I taught at the junior high for 5 years, and then I had my first baby, and I wanted a little bit more time at home.
All right, so you got to the baby.
Okay, did I?
I came before that.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Sorry. Well, my work didn't change when we got married.
That is true.
We got married, I think it was before my third year of teaching. It was in 2010.
Mm-hmm.
And that was great.
So we met, because I can now talk a little bit about it.
Okay.
We met at church.
Mm-hmm. In a small group.
Then, in a small group. We were married 2010, so it would have been first thing, late 2008 is when we would have first
met. Seen each other.
Seen each other. Struck eyes. And our first date was in January 2009, if I remember right, January. I asked you to go play tennis.
Actually, do you remember how it went down?
Did you ask me?
I asked you.
There you guys go.
I was antsy.
And I'm a coward. Still struggle with it. See, I'm glad we get this on tape.
Yeah.
Now I can't ever lie. All those times I asked you out to tennis.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. And you came to my birthday, that first, 2009. Cool. Yeah, and then we were just, I was smitten as well. I mean, look at her, guys. You're still beautiful, babe.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, so we were married July 3rd, 2010. We spent, we got engaged. I don't remember the exact date.
December 19th.
December 19th I was going to say that.
2009.
2009. Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the fun parts of you going to Point Loma is kind of being an alumni, you have the opportunity to reserve certain spots at the campus for events, and they had an epic spot for a wedding, which may have been at the number one position in terms of your places to get married for probably before even college, because you knew. I don't know if you knew about it then, but we got married at the what was it called? Well, the alumni house.
Alumni lawn.
The alumni lawn, just an epic.
It overlooked the ocean
under
a huge, beautiful tree.
It was pretty sweet.
It was pretty cold.
What do they call the weddings where you leave town? Destination. Yeah, we had a destination wedding. I don't know about small. It was medium size, I bet. A little over 100 people. It was a great day.
It was.
I would say it was a great week because we definitely drug it out. You know, the pre-partying, all that pre-partying that we did.
Yeah.
Emily's not a partier, guys. I was trying to think earlier, how do you let them know how conservative you are? Like you were talking about spending hours in the vortex.
Yeah.
That's you to a T. Yeah. No partying going on, which is good.
I could have fun, but
yeah,
I always follow the rules.
Which isn't fun. I mean, come on. That's awesome. Yeah, what a great week that was.
It's fun. I've had people ask me before, what would you change about your wedding if you could go back and do it again? I wouldn't change anything. I loved it so much.
I would have just added having a videographer do the video. That was just, but I mean, as far as.
But everything else about the day
it was
just perfect.
An amazing,
I loved it all.
Amazing day. We had our reception.
I wish I could have eaten more food at the reception.
Yeah, that was an interest. That was
really
such a hard thing because we were just talking to all the guests and obviously caught up and all that. And we were at Tom's Lighthouse, which just had the bestest. Like the spread was off the charts.
It was really good.
And we hardly ate any of it, which is hilarious.
Yeah.
It was worth it. So, July 3rd, 2010, we got hitched. And then you continued to work in Mesa. So it would have been another, couple years.
Yeah.
Year 4, 5-ish, 4, whatever. So then we had our first child.
Yeah, Wyatt was born November 12th of 2012. And I had decided kind of at the end of that previous school year that because the junior high it was great, but it was a good amount of time. I usually would get done around 4:30 or 5 every day.
Yeah.
And we had 4 performances every year, plus some competitions and other extra kind of things. And so it was more than I wanted to do as a mom. And so I decided to go to elementary, same district. But I loved it so much. It was such a good fit, especially that time of my life. It was so fun being pregnant around little elementary kids. They would talk to my belly all the time. And they just had all sorts of questions, and it was really
The junior
fun.
hires weren't saying that?
I didn't really have a belly at the time.
Yeah.
But it was a really good fit.
Good.
I pretty much taught, I guess the first year I was at 3 elementary schools.
Okay.
To make it be a full-time position, but after that I think I only was at 2.
Yeah.
So it was good.
We were living in Chandler at the time, just a couple minutes from your folks. Do you remember all the fun stuff? I'm a huge DIY, do-it-yourself guy, and in the first house we lived in,
we knocked down some walls. Painted everything.
We got dirty.
Landscaping.
And you joined right in.
Yep. It was really fun.
You're game for that kind of stuff.
We got to scrape popcorn ceiling off the ceiling. That was the worst.
That was
It was not fun.
No.
But it was an amazing result.
Oh my
afterwards,
gosh. Yeah.
so.
Of all the things, I'm going to have to add that to the list of like the things with the biggest impact for kind of the least amount of work. And it's a lot of work to
It was
scrape
a lot of
popcorn.
work. Yeah.
Obviously, painting is right up top.
Lighting.
Oh, yeah. Adding, recessed lighting. And scraping popcorn. Oh my gosh. That's so funny you say that because I just pictured in my head. So my grandparents had popcorn ceiling in their old house.
Yeah.
And it just modernizes it instantly.
Totally did. So
That was good.
That was a fun house.
That was fun.
Built a huge deck porch. On the back.
Yep.
I miss that porch.
That was a sweet porch. So then what? So we have Wyatt.
Yeah. So I taught a couple more years. Somewhere in that time, I think it was before we got married, I had joined a string quartet. And so we did that pretty steadily the first few years I was in it. And then I got married. Somebody else got married.
Well, you had more kids.
I had a kid. Somebody else had a kid.
Yeah.
So life got a little harder to be able to meet regularly. But we did a lot of fun events. We did a performance one year, I think at a place in Scottsdale, where we just did music throughout the decades.
Okay.
And so we started with some show tunes from the early 1900s and a couple Elvis pieces and some stuff from Broadway. And so it was really fun.
Yep.
But not a whole lot of performing happened after I had kids. Besides playing at church.
Makes sense.
So then after my second year of teaching, during my second year of teaching, we got pregnant with our second baby, Lizzie, who was born June 29th of 2014.
Yep.
And we were trying to decide what I was going to do because paying for childcare meant that my paycheck was almost down to zero. And so we decided that a couple $100 a month wasn't worth me going to work. And I really wanted to stay home with the kids.
Yeah.
And so we decided to... I decided to quit being in the schools and just stayed home. And I think it was, maybe just 6 months or so after Lizzie was born, I started teaching a handful of private lessons.
Okay.
And meanwhile, all throughout college, I taught private lessons. Even when I was teaching in the classroom, I had a couple of private students here and there. Yeah. So it's kind of this thing that I had in my life almost consistently.
Yeah.
With hardly any breaks.
Yeah.
And I've always really liked it. It's fun to teach a classroom, but I really enjoy being one-on-one with kids or students who have whatever their ages, because you just really make a lot more progress, and there's so much more, specific help and training and teaching that you can do with one person than 40.
It reminds me. I started playing golf my freshman year of high school. And if I were to take a golf lesson one-on-one versus one-on, say, 5 or 10, the experience is it's the type of activity that really requires eyes on all aspects at all times. Because it's just, it all... happens in the little things that need to be watched after. So it would make sense that, you getting to be one-on-one with people, the impact is just exponential.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can notice and pick up on things that I wouldn't have seen in the classroom.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Okay.
So then, so I was basically a full-time stay-at-home mom. And we had our third baby, Autumn, in November 1st of 2016. And then our fourth baby, Zachary, March 10th of 2018.
Yep.
So they're all anywhere from 1.5 years to 2 years apart.
Yep.
And that is most of my life now, is being a mom, taking care of them. I homeschool our older 2 kids, 2nd grade and 1st grade. And I still play piano and violin and sing. I play at church. Now that we're in Prescott, I don't have my old string quartet anymore. So someday I would love to get back into that because it's probably one of my favorite avenues of playing.
Okay.
Is in the quartet.
Okay. Let's talk about Prescott a little bit, then we'll jump into the studio that you have, and we'll talk more of the music stuff. You grew up coming to Prescott from Chandler. Take it from there, and then just bring us forward to how you and I ended up moving here.
So I have an aunt and uncle who moved to Prescott when I was very little, and so we would come and visit them. I have 2 cousins that are close in age to me, so we would, just come to visit them, do birthday parties or holidays up here. There's a Nazarene campground in Prescott, and so growing up in the Nazarene church, we did summer camp every summer at the campground. And the Nazarene campground is really unique in that it's not just dorm rooms or cabins. They actually have cabin owners on the campground. And so my parents and my grandparents both have had their own personal cabin on the campground for my whole life. And so we always had a place to come stay in the summer. Well, whenever we wanted, but it was mostly in the summers that we would come. And we just grew up. Prescott was always like our favorite place to come. We loved climbing on rocks. We loved going to the lakes and being with our cousins, of course. I loved the mountains and just the smell of the pine trees. And so that was my experience growing up.
Yes, so very much
events on the courthouse
ingrained
square.
in your early years.
And then when you and I think when we were dating or engaged, we came up to Prescott.
Probably.
And you had maybe only been once or twice.
At most.
And so I kind of showed you around a little, and you
showed me the ropes,
it.
honey.
I did.
Your stomping ground.
Yeah, and you loved it. And we kind of said, man, if we could ever move to Prescott, let's do it.
Yeah.
So we finally did a couple years ago.
Yep.
And
took us about 8 years. It was a long time in waiting for, I think, the Lord to open up doors and close other doors. And now we're here.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we really love it. I think our whole family does.
What is it that you really like about the area?
I love the beauty, and I love all the things outside that there are to do. I love that there's a lake 5 minutes from our house with awesome trails that I can take the kids and rocks that they can climb. Yeah. And there's like every lake has a playground, and so you can do the playground a little bit and the lake for a little bit. And I love just kind of the pace of life here. It's just a little slower, and people take time to be friendly, and I love that. I love that as you're driving through a neighborhood, everyone waves at you. That doesn't happen in Phoenix.
Right.
And so I love the friendliness and familiarity, all the community events that happen mostly around the holidays, but even farmers markets and just the arts and crafts fairs in the summertime. And it just makes it feel like a family of a town.
Absolutely.
Everyone feels so familiar. So
those are my answers too. Yeah. We've now been here about coming on 2.5 years, like just over 2 years. It's wonderful. Oh man. I feel like I already take it for granted, but as you're talking about all of the things that this area has to offer, I love it. Oh my gosh. When I was out today doing door flyers, some of the views that I got to it's just an amazing, beautiful, really unique topography around here too. And I feel like every view that I saw today, it was just different and unique.
Sure.
Just really pretty.
Yeah. There's little different parts of town. You can
Totally.
go in the pine trees, or you can go in the lakes areas.
And I was looking into the very bouldery area. I forget the name of it. But it's really pretty, really unique. So we love Prescott.
We do.
Let's dive into your studio. For sound clip purposes, give me a less than 60-second. Here's the name of my studio, and here's what I do.
Okay. My studio is called Rotty Violin and Piano Studio, and I teach private violin or piano lessons to my students. Each lesson is about 30 minutes long every week, and I go through either method books or technique or theory depending on the student and what they need. It's definitely very personalized, and I do performances a couple times a year. I have a recital actually coming up this week.
Yep.
And the kids get to prepare for that and perform and get that opportunity to do that.
Great. What else?
So,
so you have a lot of parents coming to talk to you about their children. I'd really like this to be an opportunity where you can answer some of the most frequently asked questions and just some of the give parents. Parents are a majority of the people you interact with because their children are your students. And so just start to talk about that, give them information and just things like that.
Yeah, so most commonly asked question is, how old do they need to be to start lessons? And I think it's different for piano versus violin, but a good rule of thumb is it really helps if they can read, that they know the order of their letters, that A comes before B, B comes before C, just because of learning how the notes are related to each other. If they can focus and pay attention for more than 2 minutes, ideally for a 20 to 30 minute lesson for a really little kid, because otherwise their lesson is, all for naught if they can't sit and pay attention and understand what we're talking about. Also, the younger the child, the parent needs to know, the more involved the parent needs to be, because they're going to have to, depending on the kid's reading level, they're going to have to read what I'm writing on their assignment for the week and help to make sure that they're sitting at the piano and practicing what's in their book and maybe helping them along the way. So the younger the child, the more parent involvement there is. For violin, it is so much of what you learn, you're learning by ear, because there's not a button that you're pushing like on the piano or on other instruments. And so you just have to be really aware of what you're hearing and able to discern, oh, this note is not quite in tune. And so know, and I help you learn this, but know if I have to go a little higher or lower, and whatever it is. So just kind of an awareness is really helpful. The younger the child, again, the more parents are going to have to help with that. And so some kids like me, I really liked playing it and it was really fun. And so even though some of it was hard, I just kept doing it.
Yeah.
Other young kids, even kids I've had in 4th grade, it's hard to play. And so they get really frustrated really fast and they don't stick with it. So I would say for kids who are wanting to learn a string instrument, definitely can. And it actually, I think, lends itself to younger children because you can learn a lot of it by ear. You can learn piano by ear too, but because you have to be so aware of listening as you're playing violin, it lends itself a little bit more to learning by ear. And like I said, initially when I was young, I learned by ear, and it wasn't until I got older and could actually read that I learned how to read music. So that kind of came after.
Yeah.
And trying to think of what else I wanted to say. So for violin, it just, and for both instruments, it just really depends on the child and the family and the situation.
Can you give a couple real world examples without using names of students and parents, just to give people some context on because you've had recently a 4-year-old
Mm-hmm.
doing piano who has just turned 5.
Yeah.
So anyway, just talk about
Right.
that.
Yeah, so she's probably one of my younger students I've had, but she's doing great. Her mom has also some piano experience, so she's able to help her,
Okay.
which I think is key to why she's been doing so well.
Mm,
In general, the younger the child, the slower they're going to progress, but she's progressing. She's just slower than my 17-year-old who's learning,
Yeah.
So, and then I've had students, like I said, in 4th grade who just can't get it or don't seem to care. And maybe it's more their parents that want them to do it. And so they don't put in any practice time.
Mm-hmm.
And so their lessons are pretty tedious and awful because it's the same thing that we do every single week.
Yeah.
And so, it just, like I said, it largely depends on the child. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I've had adults ask me if I can teach adults. And yes, I can. It's different than teaching a child because adults are so aware of themselves and of
Yes.
they can verbalize maybe problems they're having or questions they have or things they're noticing about the practice or the music. And so it's just a lot more, I don't know the word, they can express it more easily. So their lessons are maybe going to be more to the point, and more of a dialogue and conversation versus me just telling the child, oh, I don't think you're playing this right. Do you hear that? Trying to get them to hear it versus the adults like, oh, that was out of tune.
Yeah.
So, so it's just different. But yes, I can teach adults. And as long as you're willing to put in practice,
That's it.
you're going to make progress.
Yeah.
So
which is no difference at what age you're in.
Right. If the only time you ever play your instrument is during your lesson, you're not really going to learn.
Right.
You're not going to get very far.
Mm-hmm.
It takes practice at home. That's where the majority of the work happens.
Yeah.
And then when you come to your lesson, I check to make sure that what you practiced was right. And I teach you new things, and you go home and you work on those new things. So
yeah,
it's kind of the bottom line of it.
Mm-hmm. From the outside looking in, it seems to me that there's a lot of things that the parents just need to have proper expectations.
Sure.
Because it's a bit of work,
Yeah.
especially for most of your students who are 14 and under or something, or even maybe even younger. That it's a process, and it takes time and effort, and it takes practice.
Yeah.
'Cause without that component coming to you, just you can't work miracles like that
Right.
without the practice component.
Right.
And so I feel like for parents to have the correct expectations is really important.
Yeah. And thankfully, I think I've found some really good methods over the years, method books that I use that make the learning fun. Even when a kid can only play 3 notes, they can play a cool piece of music.
Okay.
So I'm thankful for those kind of things.
Yeah.
It makes it enjoyable and like they feel like they're accomplishing something.
Yeah, because they need a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Or else it's not going to be enjoyable.
Hot cross buns gets old after a while.
Which one's that?
Hot cross buns, 1 a penny, 2 a penny, hot cross buns. It's only 3 notes.
Oh, yeah.
So
It's already old.
yeah.
What else for people interested in violin and piano?
Yeah, I think having the expectation that it's a long-term thing. You can't expect in 1 month to be really good. I mean, that's very, very, very rare. I think if you have the expectation of 1 year to start out and see kind of how things go, a lot of families are like, I don't know if piano is our thing, and we have no musical background, but our kid really wants to play piano. Yeah, it's like after 1 or 2 months, it's too hard to say, and they've hardly learned anything to be able to show or feel really good about what they're playing.
To get involved at all is
Yeah, so
Unlikely.
Having a good year, they can come to a couple of my recitals and hear more experienced players and get a chance to perform themselves. I think just that chance to perform,
that's huge
for most kids, it's a really good motivator, obviously, for them to practice. And then it's a cool accomplishment that they get to
Very much
perform, and people like what they hear. And so yeah, that's a good starting point.
Okay.
And usually I think it's a good amount of time, too, to decide, no, this isn't a good thing. And also age of your kid plays a role in that. If they're really little, 1 year might not be enough time to decide if that's the right thing for them or not. But yeah, so that's a
good point.
A thing that's
I did forget to mention, I know you know this, but the people don't know it. I played trumpet, or I was an athlete growing up. That's what I did, and I was enamored with sports. And my parents, I decided to play trumpet. I guess I decided to. I played trumpet in 3rd grade, and my parents right out of the gate said, you got to do it for the whole school year. And I said, okay. And all my friends dropped out after the first month, and I wanted to drop out so bad, and they had me stick it out, and then I quit as soon as I could. I think that's a funny story.
It is funny.
Thanks, Mom and Dad, for making me stick out the trumpet.
I played clarinet for 1 year in elementary school.
Just to give,
I think in 5th grade,
a different instrument.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think my mom had played, and so she had the clarinet at the house.
Yeah.
And it sounded really interesting to me. It was different than what I had done for a long time. And my orchestra at school wasn't that fun. And I was in a youth symphony at the time, and so I was like, I'm just going to do a new
something
instrument.
different.
And it was really fun, and I really liked it. But then I decided, it's too much work to try to get really good at another instrument.
Yeah, you knew.
So
you knew from experience. That's great to try. Yeah. I think I would argue that it is good for almost every kid to try a musical instrument.
Yeah, it's a
I think
very
just
valuable
trying
skill.
things in life, and I know this is something you and I talk about with our kids. We want them to try things, whether it's just the food that you cook for them. We want them to try things, because you can learn so much from simply trying things. And that's why I'm glad my parents made me stick it out for a year. I think that, or 9 months. I think that's really important. And it's a hard balance to have. Because I just think back to my playing, because right before I quit soccer when I was 13, I was on 3 teams. 3 teams at once. It was just overload.
Yeah.
And so how do you balance this? Hey, I really want you to try something, and I want you to stick with it for a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
And then at the same time to give them grace that if this is not for them at some point, then hey, I'm so glad you tried it.
Yeah.
Good.
Right. That brings up another point, just thinking of all the activities that kids are in. If your student or your child is in 5 activities, I probably wouldn't recommend taking private lessons, because it's a good amount of time. I recommend 30 minutes for my younger kids, 30 minutes of practice every day. And that's a lot if you have soccer practice.
Well, if they're in school already, there's hardly any time left.
Yeah. So just be aware of the time commitment that is required. It's not just a 30-minute lesson a week. It's every single day of practicing.
Yeah. Back to the right expectations. Would you suggest trying piano for a year while they're not doing, say, an athletic thing? Like, as you think about our kids, is there an ideal scenario that you would have for a child?
Yeah, I mean, I think if after a year you as a parent feel like your child has kind of a musical ear, like they're getting it, I would recommend letting them continue, because it's hard to play for a year and then stop and do something else, because then when they try it again, they'll probably have forgotten a bit, and maybe I've seen it happen. Some bad habits come
Of
up
course.
because they've forgotten, but they're trying to jump back in where they left
Mhm.
off. But they really should come back a few
Yeah.
steps, and so that's really hard to do.
Okay.
It can be done,
Of
but
course.
it's not ideal.
Yeah.
So yeah, like if your child just really seems to love playing music, then I think I would encourage you to just let them stick it out, and maybe they can also. My brothers growing up, they did
Mhm.
piano and violin lessons and sports. So
Okay.
I mean, it's possible.
You
It's just
absolutely.
a
Mhm.
lot of their time is spent doing those things.
Yep, and a lot of the family's time is spent doing
That too.
those things. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that's something you and I talk about is we don't want to become like taxi cab parents and all we do
Right.
is drive between
Mhm.
event and event and
Mhm.
event and our kids are just loaded
Mhm.
up
Yeah.
with things.
Mhm.
It's and there's no right or wrong answer,
Mhm.
but trying
Yeah.
maybe one thing at a
Mhm.
time. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
We're still even early in that.
Right.
Mhm.
Well, and I would say getting back to the starting age, most of my students who I've started in 3rd or 4th grade have done so great.
Mm.
They learn at a really good pace. Younger than that, the majority of them learn slower. And some of them have the patience to stick with it.
Yeah.
But it's hard. It's harder. And a lot of parents don't have the time to sit with their kids every day to practice. That's the really hard thing,
Yeah.
I think. When they're older and they can read and they can take 20 or 30 minutes and just go in their room and practice, like that's so much easier on the whole family. So, yeah. So, while it is possible to teach a young child, it's probably more ideal to wait until they're, a little bit more independent. So,
That makes sense.
mhm.
Okay. Before we get to the rapid fire question section, just look at the camera and give people who are thinking about violin or piano lessons,
Mhm.
give them a sub 60 second, like, hey, just give them your little
Okay.
spiel.
Okay. If you are thinking of learning the piano or the violin, I would love to help you. I'm pretty good at finding people's strengths and weaknesses and using those to help them overcome the weaknesses and emphasize their strengths and to become a good musician. I have a love for music and it is one of my passions. And so I love sharing that with other people and helping them develop that passion as well. And I hope that I can do that for you.
And like every guest who has sat across the table from me, you're such a huge resource. Like, you started when you were 3, and you went to college for it. You have a passion for it, just like you shared. So if you guys have any questions, I'll put in all the contact information so people can ask you questions, because that's where so many people begin. They don't know for obvious reasons. Every person is different, every situation is different, and they just need questions answered. And so that's something that you not only enjoy, you're good at, and just comes with the territory.
Right.
So we'll put in all that information.
Okay.
Anything else on the musical front?
I don't think so.
Okay. Then let's dive into the rapid fire question section.
Okay.
Answer with the first word that comes to mind.
Okay.
And if you have more than one answer, just give it.
Okay.
People always say, I got more than that. So just say it.
Okay.
Number 1, what's your favorite thing about Greater Prescott?
The beauty and the people.
What's your favorite restaurant in Greater Prescott?
Okay. Let's see. I would say Biga and Farm Provisions and El Gato Azul and Colt Grill.
I told you.
Oh, and limoncello.
When I did Candace Divine.
Oh, and Taratai. Sorry. I've got a lot.
Yeah, she listed like 15 places. It was awesome.
There's a lot of restaurants I love.
There are. And actually, on a little tangent real quick, because we lived for a short time in South Scottsdale.
Mm-hmm.
So we got to go to Old Town quite often on date nights and fantastic restaurants. And so one of the things that I was so disappointed with was leaving all those restaurants and coming up to Prescott and not having as good of food. We have really good food.
There's a lot of good options.
We have a lot of passionate restaurant owners that put out a really good product.
Also want to give a shout out to Old World Bakery. It's not as much of the restaurant, but the bakery is so good. I love going in there for coffee and a croissant.
Man, there are each restaurant is kind of, I would say, an artisan in a sense, and we have a lot of them. Fourth question: who's your favorite all-time musician?
Probably Joshua Bell, violinist.
What are 3 words to describe living in Greater Prescott?
I'm bad at this. It's fun, friendly, and beautiful.
If you weren't a stay-at-home violin, piano, studio teacher lady married to me, what would you be doing?
I would probably be teaching in a classroom of some sort, like music classes. Or I might have gone to like culinary school because I love cooking and baking. So that's my other on the side passion that I like to do.
I'm glad you like to do it. I'm a big beneficiary of it. Last question. What is your favorite summer activity in Greater Prescott?
I mean, at some point when our kids are old enough, I would like to get into kayaking or boating of some sort. But that's not really realistic for us. So right now is just hiking around the lakes. I just think it's so pretty. And they're pretty easy hikes that our little kids are able to do.
Totally.
So
we call it trail walking around here, around our house. Well, we're not quite into the hiking yet. Funny side note for you guys, I took Wyatt and Lizzie to Thumb Butte. It's now been,
last summer.
Yeah, I would say a year and a half ago. And they were so psyched up to do Thumb Butte, and we literally got out of the parking lot across the street onto the trail, and Lizzie was like, I'm tired. So she'd only been 5. So we're not quite on the
not
hiking.
Ready for hikes yet.
But yeah, we love getting out. The kids love it. Oh my gosh, just seeing, and that's one of the reasons we moved here. So we can be outside more and just the kids eat it up. Just like it's the simplest stuff for the kids.
Just watching the ducks.
Feeding the ducks.
So
I mean, they just like they're in their environment when they're outside. It's such an awesome thing. Yeah. Thanks for sharing all your answers and all your restaurant answers. We got a lot of good places to eat. Thank you so much for your willingness and your courage to be a guest on the podcast, honey.
Thank you for having me.
You did great.
Thanks.
Was it as hard as you thought it'd be?
No.
Yeah, it's not that bad. You already know all the answers. Like I tell everyone, you already know it.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. I'll put in all your contact information. You guys, if you have any questions for Emily, I call her let her know.
Yeah.
She's a wealth of information. Anything else before I'll actually let you wrap this puppy up because you're going to play the piano piece.
Oh, that's right.
So just one more time, I will say, you guys, thank you very much for watching, and you take us out of here with what you're going to play.
Okay, I'll be playing Christmas medley.